Hi everyone. Glorious winter's day where I live. The sun's out. I'm in the sun room or the sun hall. I'm wearing the infamous pink singlet. It's fading with every wash, but I'm going to treasure it till the end. It was the first thing I bought for my first day in South Africa, and it holds a lot of sentimental value to me, the old pink singlet. So today's topic is my descent into madness or hell. A bit clickbaity, you're probably saying. Kind of, but if you've lived through addiction, then it's not an exaggeration. So I chose the word descent because it was very gradual, and the reason I'm talking about this is partially I need to keep reminding myself of how I got here, how bad it was, so that I don't ever go back to it. And if it helps somebody else, if there's someone out there that's going through addiction, then that's good. And if there's somebody that's gone through the same process as I have, then they'll understand a lot of the phrases and the kind of terminology I use. So I have to say that if I look at the descent, it really started very early. I was an exceptionally shy kid, absolutely was tied to my mum's apron strings. I remember hiding behind her. If we met someone in the street and mum was talking to them, I'd be hiding behind her legs and looking around, and they might say, "Oh, hello," to me, and I'd duck back behind mum's dress and I'd be like this. But when you got to know me, I was a real chatterbox. I was a little motor mouth. Absolutely loved talking, loved joking. Those on the back of the comic books, you know, those slapstick sort of devices, whoopee cushions and joy buzzers, practical jokes, loved them. So the first shock came when I had to go to school, and it was a real bloody it was a shock to me. You know, I don't know, I probably went to school at 5 or 6 or something, probably more likely 6. I'd had a pretty idyllic life at the back of the cake shop, mum popping out every now and then to check I was alright, sitting in front of the TV with Andy Pandy, the flower pot man. I loved it. I thought life couldn't get any better. And then they took me to school. They took me to St. Joan of Arc's. And I was terrified. I was terrified of the other kids. And I don't know where that came from. I was exceptionally shy, and I'd sit and watch the other kids running around on the playground, and I'd sit under those big old pine trees and sing that monkey song, "I Want to Be Free." There is a tree at the back which is nothing like the tree I remember, but it has some similarities in its placement. It was a big old Moreton Bay fig that I sat under, and I used to sing to myself in loneliness up against that wall. You see where that big tree is in the corner? I reckon there was a big Moreton Bay fig along there, and I'd sing "I Want to Be Free" by Davy Jones of the Monkees. I found that my defence or my mechanism as a kid was to be funny, to be a joker, a comedian, and then I could sort of get them off my back. I don't remember being particularly bullied or picked on. It was an inner fear in me, a xenophobia. And but when I became a little comfortable, I could start being a clown and a joker in the class, and that seemed to be my place. And that didn't change too much for most of my childhood. So I don't know why, but we changed schools not long before we went to South Africa. I changed schools. I went to just a state school, Wilson Street State, left the Catholic school. So we're now at what used to be in my day Wilson Street State. It certainly hasn't changed the front anyway. from my days. I could walk here from the home we moved into after the shop, and we'll go there next, but I've got good memories of the school. None of the Catholic fear was here. It was just a state school. I started to make some friends and started to feel that I was socially acceptable, I suppose. Went to the Wilson Street State. That was a bit disruptive, but I think I settled in reasonably quickly. There's a couple of teachers I really liked at Wilson Street, and then we went to South Africa, and that was terrifying as far as schools go. You know, my accent drew attention to me. I couldn't speak Afrikaans. They were bullies. I got bashed. I got caned, strapped. You know, there's episodes on that. So what I'm talking about here is a very shy person, a very insecure, shy kid. And you know, once Mum was killed, within 6 months of being in South Africa, Mum was killed in the car accident. I'm the last survivor from that car, and I didn't know at the time that my way of coping was to just forget about it. So my sister came over within a week of Mum's death. She came over for Mum's funeral, and I'd always been very close with my sister. We were inseparable. Well, I idolised my sister. When I was a little kid, I followed her around like a sheep, like a lamb. And she took me everywhere in a Volkswagen in the late 60s, and parties and even dates with her boyfriend. She'd take me along. Absolutely idolised that woman. And so she came over to help with the funeral arrangements, and that's when, I don't think I really ever mentioned the accident. I got a knock on the head going through a windscreen, so maybe I played that I had no memory of it. But anyway, she went back to Australia, and within, you know, when I went back to school, I made out that nothing had happened over the school holidays, and it changed the topic, didn't really talk about my mum. So you might be wondering what's all that got to do with addiction. So what happened was, once I found substances to get out of my own head, I seemed to have a natural affinity to them. So I don't know what came first. Actually, I think I do. So last year when I went to South Africa, I met up with my mate Brian Gould, and he took me out to State Mines. That's where I met Brian Gould. These kids, the Heralds, I've also done episodes on them. But I was hanging around with the Heralds, and there was half a dozen of these kids. They were a single parent. I started hanging around with kids that came from single parent backgrounds and were getting into trouble, bit of petty crime, bit of risk taking, not that much interest in school classes. But before Mum died, I was hanging out with kids. They were Jewish kids that were serious about, well, not serious, but they were normal kids. We were collecting stamps, building stilts, flying kites, riding our bikes. But after Mum died, I started getting into petty crime and risk taking. So on that occasion, I was walking with these Heralds, and we saw their cousin Yanni. Now, he lived opposite the Park Hotel. Once again, there's an episode where I'm at the Park Hotel, and I looked at where Yanni used to live with his grandmother in these, it's like a boarding house. They were dirt poor. So Yanni was jumping around and singing, and I couldn't understand why was he carrying on. So I said to the Herald, what's up with him? And they said he's drunk. And like a light bulb went on in my head. I didn't know kids could get drunk. I didn't know it was available to kids. And yeah, as I said before, I'm quite shy, but I immediately beelined towards this kid Yanni. I don't think I'd met him before. And I said, can you get booze for me? He said, yeah. You know, come and meet me at my place. And it was real easy. You just went to a bottle shop and you hung around, and there were Africans going in and out of the bottle shop, and you gave them 50 cents or something, and they came out with a bottle of Brandivino or something in a paper bag, and we were set, you know. And he was stealing money from his Omar, his grandmother, you know, and she was bloody dirt. He was sleeping on the floor on the mat next to her her bed, you know. I don't know where his parents were, but he didn't live long, you know. For him, it went on and it took his life. You know, he was trapped by alcoholism at an early age, and he didn't live a long and fruitful life, unlike me for some reason. So anyway, that's how it started. And then I remember going to see my brother's band Void. One night we walked all the way from State Mines, all the way into Brakpan to the Catholic church. We were drinking Portuguese wine on the way. And when we got to the church, I mean, it was so foul to drink. We were mixing it with sugar. And I threw my guts up outside the church hall, the Catholic church, once again, which we saw in the Brakpan videos last year. Went back to that Catholic church and saw the rose gardens where I lay throwing my guts up before going to see the band. So that's where it started. And then when my sister came out in 73, there was another incident I tend to remember. It was New Year's where we took my sister to Swaziland. We stayed in a hotel. It was 73, maybe going into 74, or maybe 72 going into 70. It was a New Year's Eve thing. And they had these polystyrene sort of hats, like boater hats, at the table. Wherever we were staying, the Holiday Inn or something. And there was champagne being poured. And I don't know, I started drinking champagne. No one saw me and no one said anything. And I was eating this polystyrene hat to get a laugh. People were laughing. And I was drinking champagne and I got horribly sick and hung over the next day. And that's how it started. So what I've learned about addiction is it got me out of myself. It enabled me to be something that I actually wasn't, which was an extrovert, and be the life of the party. And it runs in my family. My uncles were alcoholics, definitely on mum's side. But it wasn't just alcohol. So the other thing we started getting into was sniffing glue. We were breaking into factories and the railways. I remember we stole a big thing of glue from the railways. We were sitting around sniffing that. We tried smoking dope, or dacha, they call it. And also these things that were like inhalers. If you had, there's a lot of mining goes on over there. It was to help with dust on the lungs or something, I can't remember. But someone, we were breaking open these inhalers and getting the strips out the centre, which were soaked in this fluid, and ingesting them. The other big thing was cough medicines. So we started to line up and go into chemists and buy bottles of cough medicine and drinking them, and you'd trip right out. Like you'd see lights, you'd be up all night. Some of them got you foaming at the mouth, your eyes would go real wide. Of course, by this stage, I was sort of living in a flat with my brother. Dad had to get a job away from us, so I had no supervision. I could get up to anything I wanted. Also, the friends had changed. The Heralds weren't that into it, but I'd met some other kids like Johan van Rensburg. He was a big one, and he knew older kids in Johannesburg that were into smoking pot and all sorts of pills and powders. And also there was another kid called Norman Monks, I think his name was. His mother was on these pills for her obesity, like speed. And I remember he knocked some of those off, and we took some of those pills. They were all speedy. I was right into it. Anything that you offered me, I was into. And the other thing I remember about that time was someone telling me about they took acid and they had visions of being chased by a giant toothbrush, running across the road and being chased by a giant toothbrush. And they said they saw this sausage dog walk up to the pavement and the front legs stretch right over the pavement, and then the two back legs followed it. And that sounded fantastic to me. That was like a cartoon, a living cartoon. So I started wondering where I could get chemicals that would give me visions like that. That's how far out I wanted to get. I mean, I was living on comic books and fantasies, toys, fantasies and comic books. Not really interested in school, doing enough to get by. So that was kind of the state of things. And I'd been caught for shoplifting. Yeah, that was kind of the state of things when I got called back to Australia. My sister probably knew that I was getting into, or Dad knew or suspected, but I was starting to get into petty trouble with the cops and in South Africa. So anyway, my sister called me back, or offered a home to me. Once again, there's an episode I did last year on that. I interviewed my sister on the channel, talked to her about those days. I came back and it was, it saved my life. I've come to understand that if I'd have stayed there, the guys I was starting to hang around with were getting into heavier and heavier drugs and alcohol, and I would have followed for sure. So when I got back, it gave me sort of about a year where I didn't really know anyone in Australia to just hang out at home and find new friends. Once again, the terror of starting a new school was there. This time it was the reverse. I had a South African accent when I got to Caulfield Tech. Real short hair, they all had long hair. And but yeah, it got me out of that environment that I'd been in Brakpan and gave me a fresh start. So I remember in that first year, I said to I got invited to a party or something, and I said to my sister, what can I take to drink, you know? And she suggested Southern Comfort, which was a thing at the time. I'm talking mid-70s, right? And I bought this bottle of Southern Comfort. Never drank it since, I don't think. But when we got to the party, yeah, I drank it real fast. I don't know what I mixed it with, probably Coke or something, but I drank it real fast. I got sick, I vomited. I hooked up with some girl called Tracy. I mean, she had the train tracks, big red hair. Ended up on the bed with her, writing on Texter, I love you. And then for the weeks afterwards, I had to try and get rid of her, poor girl. But I didn't have the guts to be honest with her, so I dragged it out. And anyway, yeah. Early days, you know, experimental with alcohol, but the cycle was set, or the signs were there. So let's have a look at my 18th and my 21st birthdays. By now, I've got quite a few friends because I started working at the supermarket as well as school. After school, work at the supermarket, I was packing bags, and they got me in the storeroom, filling shelves. It's pretty good money for a kid, you know, and I was eager to work, so I was getting, you know, pretty good money. And so yeah, my 18th and my 21st birthday, I had a girlfriend by that stage. I'm not going to use names in these stories. I made a mistake a while back using real names, but I shouldn't have done it. But anyway, so I'm not going to use names, but I got myself a girlfriend. And so my 18th and 20th, they're almost carbon copies. So what happens with me is I get real excited. So the day of the party, you know, I've gone down, I've bought all the stuff for the party, cups and plates, and I bought the booze. And I still remember I bought this big thing of like sparkling wine, not champagne, but cheap. I don't remember what it's called, Bodega or something. And yeah, it was Rotgut. And my sister said, "You got to be kidding." I said, "No, it's really, it was affordable. It was a big magnum of it for something like $4.50 or something." I ended up being the one who mainly drank it. And I don't remember. But yeah, so I peaked early, you know. So I'm setting up the party, got the music on, I'm drinking before they've even arrived. And I'm flying high, I'm having a great time, but by the time the guests would arrive, and this is the 18th and the 21st, by the time the guests arrive, I'm already flying high. And for my 18th, I hooked up with a girl called Virginia. She said I wasn't going to use real names, but you know, I don't know what happened to her. But yeah, I was in my room when they were wanting to cut the cake and all that. I'd already isolated, I was off with her. And for my 21st, I was just a stumbling mess. But both parties, by about midnight, you were getting no sense out of me. I was falling all over the place, repeating myself, spitting when I was talking to you, being stupid, and ended up vomiting under the jacaranda tree at my sister's house. Both parties were at my sister's house, and my mates trashed the place. So yeah, that's how it was early days. and I had a real attitude towards my sister, that she'd always, she was a disciplinarian, she was telling me what to do, you're not my mother, blah blah. It never occurred to me to actually be grateful for being given a home, and to try and work with her to be grateful for what I had. I had resentment inside, anger, resentment, pain, but I didn't know any of that at the time. So get my first car, got the girlfriend. I was working the part-time job and a full-time job by this stage. The part-time job had to go. So, I'm off and running with all the things a young person would want. Got myself a flat, stayed close to my sister, used my sister's house as a hotel whenever I needed to go somewhere, and any time I got into trouble, I'd go back to my sister's and expect her to help me out. And so I went to